It's that time of week again. It's API Storytelling Hour on Fridays, my favorite day of the week. Let me get the gang in here. I'm going to start with Mike. What's up, Mike?
Hey, how you doing? Good to see you, Ken.
Yeah, good to see you as well. Enjoying the week. Looking forward to the weekend as usual, but happy to be here with you today.
Absolutely.
Let's get Aiden in here. Hey.
Hey guys.
Good to see you.
I thought we were gonna do this this Thursday dinner every week, Ken. I was surprised that it didn't happen again yesterday.
Man, I'm so for that. When are you going to move to the Bay Area? I would be down for that.
All right, that's more motivation to do so.
Yeah, no, you're the one that's a little fluid right now. You should live in the Bay Area. I'm just putting the pressure on you now.
All right, yeah, I'll think about it.
So here we got a guest today, Aiden. Who'd we bring along?
We're super lucky. We have Micha, who's the founder of Paul, the most advanced API client for Mac, and he's here to tell us about his journey.
Exciting.
Excellent.
Let me bring him in here. Hey.
Hello, guys.
Yep.
Welcome.
Good to see you, Micha.
Everyone.
Welcome, Micha. So where are you at? Where are you at right now? What time of day is it?
So it is Friday evening, 9 p.m. I am based out of Tallinn, Estonia. For those who don't really know where it is, it's a Nordic country just south of Finland. So Northeast Europe. It's a beautiful little country, very high tech. The density of tech startups per square mile is really high. The government is super digitalized, so it's a great place to be and full of nature. So it's really a place for me.
Excellent.
Well, welcome to API Storytelling. Happy to have you here. And so tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what do you do? Where you come from? Let's get to know you.
Yeah, that may be too long, but I will try to summarize that a little bit. No, first of all, thank you so much, guys, for having me. You are all very influential people in the API space, so I'm truly grateful for you to having me today. So yeah, this is exciting for me as well. So a bit about myself. So I'm born and raised in France. And then I studied in college in France, and then I kind of traveled in the different countries. And I guess on the professional side of things, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur one day or another, but at the same time, I had always a passion for computer and software development. So probably won't go too far on like how did the software thing started. But my first computer was a Macintosh SE. So I have to say, looking back, I was quite a lucky kid to have such a machine at home. My dad was using that for work, but yeah, back in the days, I just thought, that's the computer we have. But like looking back, this is quite an interesting machine. It still boots. Tested a few years ago, and it's kind of funny because growing up, I actually switched to Windows. It was the cheapest machine I could get as a teenager. So it's like it was the thing, and like hacking on Windows XP, trying to do PHP and HTML pages. So kind of it was like early 2000, and it's kind of funny because I moved back to the Mac years later. So it's kind of like connecting the dots, and yeah, definitely, yeah, I kind of full circle. But yeah, I guess like everyone, not everyone, but like a lot of people, at least of my generation, born in the early 90s, the easiest thing to hack with was web. You just start with like a HTML, a bit of JS, and like when you realize the limitation, then the only thing you gotta do is PHP. And then the funny thing is I went to I would say super nerdy computer science school in France. And nerdy both in the bad way and in a good way. But I mean, I won't go into why it was bad. But the good thing is like we've done like tons of C++, like low level stuff. So super interesting. It was the first time in my life actually using a compiler. So when I brought up that all I knew was JS and PHP, that people were like kind of shocked by that. But that's at least where I learned like compiled languages and stuff like that. And from that, I moved on to actually developing iOS apps. So I think back in the days it was still like iPhone OS or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually the first, the closest I got from actually being connected to the tech scene is I did a small internship in San Francisco that actually turned out to be much longer because I just enjoyed the company and just what I was learning there, learning much more out of this internship rather than in college. But anyways, that's where I started actually learning Apple technologies and was quite fascinated by all you can do with native apps and the quality of the UI that you can get there. And yeah, I was quite in awe in front of like companies like Panic building like really high quality apps. Like if you know some of them, they had Coda, now it's Nova, Transmit, which is an app I use really on a daily basis. And I love what they were doing. It was kind of my role model. And also, I think it came a bit later, but Pixelmator or Sketch, like really apps that are native and really finely crafted, I would say. So I wanted to make an app like that one day or another, and in the middle, I started some side projects here and there. Nothing really succeeded, and I guess one day I realized that if all the things I was trying to do were products that I wouldn't really use myself. And I was like, okay, as a developer, like kind of phone games, little apps. It was the early days of iPhones. Everyone wanted to make an app, and that was probably not the best mindset to have. But yet, as a developer myself, quite full stack, doing both the back end and the front end, I realized that it's hard to debug what's happening in the middle. And here comes starting to be more interested with APIs. Like, okay, it's just not a mean of like connecting the backend of this and the front end, but actually there is like so much more into that. And connecting back to the interest in building native apps, I was like, okay, that's actually an interesting challenge to go from the iPhone to the Mac and start building something there. And then I realized that the Mac is pretty backwards in many ways. Like you still use frameworks that were built for our next step. That was like 20 years ago. Now it's like 30 years ago.
All the class names were prefixed NS for a long time. I remember that.
I almost want to call that BS, that's quite old stuff. But at the same time, it's kind of interesting. Like you build modern stuff and you still see the kind of all the legacy that is behind that.
Yeah, it's like carbon or coca, all those words. Carbon. Yeah.
I've never actually worked with Carbon, but I've seen the APIs still there. Well, now they are long depreciated and out of the system, but yeah, they were like for quite some time, and Cocoa is still there. So yeah, I guess that's how POW came to life. Like really needed, like being tired of working on little projects that I actually wouldn't really use myself. I wouldn't be proud of. Needing to actually debug APIs, and at the same time having like some kind of fascination for native apps. So that's a bit of a mix of everything came. So
I love that almost the whole story is about going an extra step, like learning more. Oh, I have a machine that not everybody has, so I get to try these things out. I started building apps when it was really early. Like, all these things that you're doing, it seems like you've just always had this sort of curiosity, is it? Or just some kind of interest to take things apart a little bit or build things a little bit differently. Is that something that is that right that I'm kind of recognizing? Is that something you recognize in yourself? And my next question would be, is that beyond tech? Like, are there other parts of your lives where you're always kind of thinking about how does this part work and how do I build one of these and so on and so forth?
Oh, first of all, I would say, Mike, I think you are probably someone who has a lot more curiosity than I do. So, and I think
think we all have a lot of
we all here have like probably are like very curious about how things work, or otherwise I don't know if we would be playing around APIs. So, but thank you for saying that. I take curiosity as a quality. So
So
if you say that, I'm grateful for you to say that.
Do you notice that outside of the API space, like in your everyday life? Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I sometimes think that, you know, at some point in my life I will just completely move out of tech, at least out of IT in a way, like maybe move to some completely different field. There is just so much interesting things happening in the world, and I think at least for me, I'm considering myself extremely lucky, and I think there are ways to contribute and like be a force for good in the world. And for sure tech is one way, but there are like just so many other ways. So
yeah, I think it's also you talk about curiosity and kind of what drives. A lot of times I'm just not satisfied. I'm thinking like, I wonder if this could be better. I wonder if this experience could be different. And that certainly goes well beyond the challenge that I have is my curiosity far outstrips my ability. So I'm very curious about things that I don't know how they work or how to modify them. And sometimes if I get up enough guts, I just start bashing around, and it's not always pretty. But I definitely am driven by that kind of curious bent. So I think it's a pattern I see, especially in a lot of founders. I think I see this notion about this could be better, this could be different. This isn't necessarily the way to do it, and I like that very much. I appreciate that.
Dangerous levels of curiosity that Mike has.
So what are, can I ask you guys, what are you curious about outside of tech?
Oh man, I mean, for me, I started in tech in the physical world. So I started playing around with electronics and physical,
Right.
and then I went to software. So the hardware is what sucked me in. I'm curious, similar ways. I'm curious back the hardware again. So I have drones that I fly, which have computers and have cameras and have APIs in them. And so but I wouldn't say I'm interested in like Internet of Things like most people, but I am interested in and curious how our physical worlds, interact and collide oftentimes with the digital world. And so cars. So I recently did an interview with Ford about their autonomous vehicles, and I have concerns, good and bad, but I'm just like, I'm so curious about, well, what does that mean when you have a connected vehicle rolling down the street with connected streets and connected lights and connected signs and other connected cars and stuff like that. So I'm hopelessly curious about that stuff, but then sometimes it freaks me out too as well. But I would say that back into the physical world but the internet is what I'm most curious about.
Yeah, I go through phases. A kind of a through line for what kind of drives me. I've talked about it here and other places, is connections, making connections. How are things connected? How are things related? How is it that we seem to see connections? So I actually am very curious about how the brain works, how we perceive, how we communicate, and it's affected a lot of things that I've done in my life. Before I spent a lot of time in IT, I was a full-time musician. So a lot of that is the same things. How do we connect with each other? How do we communicate? How do we collaborate? How does the brain work? So I'm very, very interested in things that have to do with perception and memory and creativity and the brain. And again, that's a great place where I am just totally insufficient. I'm an armchair kind of dilettante. I read books on the brain, and I read articles about memory and about all these other things, the ways that people interact. And I just enjoy it so much. And sometimes I wish I could kind of, poke around, but I'm sure it would come to no good. It would be bad. But that's an area that affects me a lot. And then it bleeds into the tech for me. I don't know. Yeah.
For me, it's all about tools. not because for any reason itself that a tool is cool, but because I like things that actually help people achieve whatever they're trying to solve. So I actually started out, I was making apps too, and I remember all these old frameworks. Then I turned that into a mobile app development platform. So that was my first company, was we built one of the visual coders. And it was so cool to see like non-programmers building stuff to solve problems in their communities. Same kind of thing with Optic, like trying to help people work better together and build more complicated systems. And then like off the clock, it's always like, how do I make myself better using technology and other people better? Because like, I feel like a lot of technology is built to distract us or to pull us in a direction. And how can you like leverage that to make yourself better? So that's my other thing I care a lot about. And then group experiences, I'm really curious about like how things happen when groups of people get together. So I do a lot of stand-up, but it's not to be funny. It's because you can like pull a whole group into the same experience. And that's like a thing that we've been doing for thousands of years in different ways. And there's just some weird phase change that happens there. I don't fully understand it, but it's really cool to like cultivate it with any kind of community. So I like stand-up for that reason.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah. So did you mentioned that you went to when you went to university, did you go to university and like study in the computer program or the computer science program, or did you start somewhere else?
Yeah, so it's actually a bit weird in France, I would say, because if you want to go to any kind of good school, you have to study for 2 years math and physics. So that was that was both a blessing and a curse, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, you learn a lot of rational thinking to go through a program like that. At the end of the day, it was 2 years, a lot of like very intense 2 years. Was it worth it? How often do I use these things in my day-to-day life? Not that much. And then from that point, I knew that I wanted to go to computer science. And it's again a little bit strange, and I think it just shows how the classical education system doesn't really fit anymore. They basically, if you want to go high, and like everyone in these universities want to aim for the best college they can get into, like it's a bit competitive. And it's kind of weird, like people just compare stuff like how college ranks, what's the average income out of college, and like this kind of, like I would say, a bit pointless metrics they just look at, and they kind of like want to go always to the top. And yeah, none of these schools actually had a decent computer science program. They would have, or that would just be on the margin of everything else. You just do a ton of mechanics, physics, engineering, and then a little bit of computer science. And I was like, no, is that really what I want to do? No. So so I went for that like nerdy school that I mentioned. And like everyone was like was kind of thinking that I'm crazy to just lose on all these amazing opportunities to go like much better colleges when that actually could get into.
I see. You ended up picking a school that was very techy, or the kind of tech you wanted, rather than something that was like one of the pinnacle. I get it. I see.
Yeah, and it's probably partially due to the fact that I just don't think at least in France the best schools have the best computer science programs. Whereas I think in the US, like some, if you look at MIT, Berkeley, Stanford, they do have stuff like that. So if you can get into that, then lucky for you, you probably have the best education. But it's not really the case, at least back in the days. Now there are like interesting ones, but they're still not like seen as the best ranked ones, but they are pretty good.
It's interesting how sometimes like signaling and substance diverge. I don't know if that's accelerating in the world or not. It's probably different in different industries, but I feel like that's something I see a lot now and I am aware of.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Micha.
Oh, sorry. I think in a way it can be the world just challenging you to make sure that you know what you want to do. When like you are being pulled a little bit in one direction, and then you need to stay true to to yourself and what you want to do, and like it's funny. It's still I still have this feeling sometimes these days, like if you want to do great things and like live a happy life, you gotta have sometimes the courage to do what you think is good for yourself. It is true. So it's I guess that was just one example. I'm rambling, sorry.
That's what the show's for.
Yeah.
It's for rambling. Great. I can do that.
So I know you deal a lot in API definitions, and we've been, several layers of this show weaves back into API specifications, and we've had some Swagger talks, some Open API. We've had conversations with Aiden and Dev last week about layers on top of it. I'm curious to hear your view of the landscape, because Rapid API, I know, has, the heart of Rapid API is very API definition driven, and so and you've clearly got experience with like API Blueprint, Swagger, all these. What's your view of the API specifications landscape? Because I know Mike's opinions and views from his hypermedia background and his kind of rooted in the web. I know Aiden hates Open API with a passion. No, I'm just kidding. I
love the future of it more than I like the present of it.
There you go. I like that. Actually, I'm going to use that a lot. I really like that.
That's good. That's good.
How do you view the landscape of API specifications and how they're used or why they matter?
It's a good question. I think from my perspective, working on an API client such as PAO, I don't think I have to go too deep into the API specification. However, I think I can share that we are working on I would say a version of PAO that's going to be a lot more closely aligned with Open API. So it's definitely somewhere I'm gonna go. So I don't know if I had the frustrations with Open API that many people had, like you, Aidan, where you're kind of confronted with like this limitation or this limitation. You are just not happy with this choice or that one. So I from my perspective, I don't think I had these moments. I had them with RAML, like trying to integrate RAML. It was a lot more of a headache. But I will say that the fact that we are moving into one standard, API Blueprint and RAML kind of losing traction and everything seems to converge into Open API, I think that's definitely great. At least we have, I believe it's better to have one standard rather than three, and you don't really know where things go. So I like that. From the perspective of Rapid API, this is absolutely great, because then we can have one single source of truth, everything being aligned with Open API, and we definitely don't want to reinvent the wheel, kind of creating our own internal format. We've done that in the past and realized that it just makes so much sense to follow like an open standard that everyone agrees on, or at least agrees on the future of. So at least we can like kind of follow that path. I have to say, personally, I had something for API Blueprint. The fact that it was Markdown based, beautifully like written, you could just understand it. It was basically built for humans, and yet like readable by machines. So that I really liked. I guess it was just, the fact that you needed a C-based parser to just like parse it, it was maybe a little bit overkill for. I think they came up with a JavaScript version at some point, but
yeah, still. I think the thing that frustrated me, I love Blueprint quite a bit, and I still use it as my kind of sketching language. If I really just want to throw something together really quick, just writing some Markdown is super, super fast. F5, I have a mock, and I love it. The thing that really annoys me is I find myself half the time counting spaces. Like, did I indent this right? Oh, if it's a group, then I have to indent it differently than if it's a single get. There were just like all these little sort of like niddling little pieces. A good editor would have fixed that, but like a good tool would have helped me fix that. But I really enjoy Markdown because of what you just said. It's very conversational. It's like the REPL in my head. I don't have to do a lot of translation. It's pretty easy for me to see right there. But of course, that's because I think in HTTP, right? Because that's really what you're doing, right? You're writing HTTP in Markdown is what it really amounts to.
That's right.
So I enjoyed that very much too, and I kind of miss it. I had kind of hoped that it would usher in, if not just and not just Blueprint, other sort of Markdown-ish versions of ways to sketch out services in a meaningful way, and it just hasn't happened. So I mean, there are lots of avenues that just don't come to fruition. Maybe it'll come back at some time, but I like Markdown a lot.
Yeah, I thought the part of Blueprint that was sort of most compatible with the way I think about APIs was that you could specify things like partially. Like you could go do like multiple passes on it. You just leave your bullet points in the fields and then say what it was later. And I feel like OpenAPI sort of rushes you to judgment because you can't leave it empty. So that was another part of Blueprint I just loved, and I would love that feature to be back.
You know, that in fact, that's a really good point, Aiden. When I teach people how to do a pattern, I use sketch, prototype, build, which is like just come up with a simple sketch and see if it makes sense, then prototype it in detail, sort of like create that test track car, that you're going to really kind of beat up before you build. That's why I really like using Blueprint, because of what you just said. We can cover that later. Just leave it here. Let's go on to the next step. And that OpenAPI does sort of force you to fill out a lot of detail before you get a running version of that story. So I think it's a really good observation.
Do you guys edit your OpenAPI specs by hand, or do you use a tool?
I do. I do. Typically, I might generate something as like a series of stubs, but then I do a lot of hand editing. I don't know about the rest of you guys.
Yeah, I do a lot of hand editing, but I have a lot of auto generation scraping tools that'll generate it, and but I do like working with it. And API Blueprint was my favorite back in the day too. And I keep feeling like I'm the old weirdo in this space about the specs, but like I brought them all together. Like so my life's kind of like an XKCD comic in this way that that I really believe, like Jacob and Z's vision. They started API. I really believed in their vision and their design vision. I liked where they went with it, but at the time, Augusto had his vision for Mashape, which became Rapid API, and then Mashery had IO docs, and Tony had Swagger, and MuleSoft was very interested in this, and they asked me to bring everyone together, all the specs together, to harmonize them. And this is kind of why your calls for action, Aiden, echo in my ear, and I did. I brought them all to a summit and to have this discussion about how do you harmonize, how should they all work together, how should the tooling work, and all of this. And then a month later, RAML came out, and MuleSoft didn't tell me they did this. So it was like, how do we, it's that XKCD comic about it. And Tony, Jacob were both pissed at me for a year. Like they wouldn't talk to me for about a year and a half, because they thought I was like stealing their intellectual property on it. And I was like, no, I want this all to work together. And so it was one of those in the space that caused a lot of issues, but I'm not sure why API Blueprint failed. I still can't figure that out. Like why the best product doesn't win in that situation.
Oh, if I may try a guess on that, I think it's just because with RAML or Swagger, I mean, most developers use JavaScript, JSON parse, whatever you have, it works. You can do everything you want. With API Blueprint, you needed to import tons of stuff. And would it work in the browser? Would it work in Node? Would it work? What if I want to do that in Python? Would I want to do it in Ruby? I think it was just too hard to parse.
So it's a lack of tooling. I would say OpenAPI Swagger had a rush of tooling that would help you, enable you, and it solved the greatest pain point. Swagger UI just nailed the pain point for people when it comes to documentation. So
and I think, Misha, you're also saying that it's it's barrier of entry issue, right?
Yeah.
So it's a higher barrier of entry issue for this sort of, you got a markdown process, and then you got to turn that into an AST. You got to do all these other things. Whereas with something like Open API, it was much more direct. Here's the URL, here's the body, here's the object, here's the methods. Go, right?
I think Open API was quite genius. I mean, the fact that you have that, you have an AST, you have the parsing, you have the it's like a real language on its own. But I think it was just like a bit overkill. I love it, but I think it was overkill for getting mass adoption, probably.
Yep.
So I know you mentioned that you're looking to add some of these specification features. I don't know how much you can talk about, but how do you see it broadly fitting into the story of HTTP clients going forward and development workflows?
Oh, yeah, I can definitely share a bit of that. So essentially, it's been quite a challenge that I had with Power for quite some time. As if you think about API clients like Power, Postman, or Insomnia, these are tools where you send requests, right? You create your request, you send them. These are not tools where you describe requests. On the other hand, describing a request would be what Swagger UI does in a way. Swagger Hub or Stoplight, they do that. They describe the request. And the way I see that is on the endpoints, as you have the endpoints that you described, are abstract. They are like classes, and the requests are the instance of these classes. So it's I think that the challenge that we are having today is we wouldn't want to create two different tools where on one side you edit the request and on the other side you edit the kind of the backbone of these requests, the blueprint of these requests. By the way, that's why I think the name API Blueprint is a pretty good one. Yeah, and ideally we would try to combine the two in a tool that actually works well. But yeah, definitely, I think what Stoplight is doing is very interesting. Being able to actually edit the full API spec. So it's definitely a direction that we will be going towards. Being able to support editing, because that's something Rapid API already has. Being able to edit a spec to publish it to the Rapid API hub. By the way, we can definitely share that. We announced that yesterday. The Rapid API Marketplace, we are renaming it to the hub. And the reason is a marketplace felt like way too much selling APIs, whereas a lot of the APIs right there are free publicly available APIs. And also more and more people just use the hub to share APIs one-on-one. You know, I want to send you an API down, or I want to share it with the team, the four of us. Would you want to share that on the marketplace? That's a bit weird, you know. It's on Amazon. You are not selling anything. But do you want to share it on the hub? Definitely makes a lot more sense.
It's about connections. It's about connections and people working together. And I would say I would also know y'all joined the Open API. I helped onboard you to the Open API recently too. So I think that's a pretty significant move in the right direction as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a great idea. Ahmad from our team, our head of DevRel, has been leading that, and I think it's amazing. I would have, to be honest, I would have done that a while ago. Just a matter of having the bandwidth to actually work on that and being actually focused. So I'm glad that we have Ahmad. I try to follow some of the calls, but like it's hard to work, but it's amazing. Yeah.
Micha, you mentioned something that kind of caught me, and I just want to make sure I kind of circle back on it. There's this. As I was listening to you, I was hearing a kind of there's a sort of a different perspective from those who are crafting requests to send and describing the requests to receive. Right? Basically, I'm going to describe this request so that you can send it to me. That's sort of the server-side world. And then there's the API client world, or you'd say API consumer world. Are we sort of missing a key element here, and that is that those are different viewpoints that need their own tooling, need their own specifications, need their own worlds. There's nothing wrong with connecting them, but is it really a good idea to say one ring rules them all, both for consumers and producers? Do we need a different set for consumers than the rest?
I think there are actually a little bit three different ways to see that. I would even say, if the kind of the API client side of things that Power Postman, Insomnia do is more of a sandbox, I would say. You have total freedom. You can send any request, and that's why in a way that's more like these tools are more like HTTP clients rather than API tools. But they are of course so useful for APIs, right? But in a way they are sandbox. You have full freedom. You want to add a header, go ahead. No one restricts you. On the other side, the kind of API specification tools, that's very strict. You define exactly the constraints that you have, the parameters, the constraints, the schemas, and it's very abstract. The other one is like on the opposite side of the spectrum. It's very concrete, and you have freedom. So I think these are the two things, and the last one is actually more on the consumer side. If you look at APIs on the Rapid API Hub, or if you discover an API on Swagger UI, what you will see is that you can edit the values of the parameters, but you cannot edit the parameters themselves. So in a way, I see these tools are as the instantiation of the class, if that makes sense. API spec is the class. Then when you want to actually send a request, you instantiate that class, and that becomes an actual request that you can send.
I really love that idea. I love that you've got this notion of abstract class and instance, right? When I was working with some of the people from the API Academy team, we were working on continuous API management. We really struck on the fact that all the time we're dealing with exactly what you're talking about. The abstract, the instance, and then the actual running instance too. You might have 7 or 8 servers that are actually running a particular instance of a class. So I love that's introduced in there. And as you mentioned it, the sort of the different rules for API client applications versus API servers. The service really does need to constrain things quite a bit. This is what I'm prepared for. This is what I can do. This, if I promise you this contract. But the client applications are much more like sure, you want a header, I'll do a header. You want to do you want to do this, you want to do that. I really recognize now that they have different sets of rules about them. That I've been playing more in the client space for the last couple of months with this little sort of like REPL tool, sort of a stateful command line client application. And I experienced some of the same things you're just mentioning, which is, sure, I'll throw a header in, what do I care, right? They're just trying to make all of those kinds of things easy. So rather than creating some kind of construction that you have to kind of navigate through, it's more like you say, a sandbox or a test case or a workbench, right? Is really kind of what it is, right?
Yeah.
Definitely,
but yet, to go back to what you were asking before, you asked me what is the connection. Then this seems to be like two different worlds, and how do we actually connect both? And at least from the perspective of the API creator, I think there are two different approaches of starting an API. You either start with design first. You want to start with a high level concepts. You draft your API spec. That goes back to what we were saying earlier. You enjoy using API Blueprint to kind of draft how the API will look like. And that's the design approach, right?
Yeah.
And I think here, like drafting your own spec with OpenAPI or using a tool like Stoplight, I think that makes sense. But on the other side of the spectrum, if you are more like hands-on and you start writing your server, and what you want to do is basically send API calls towards the server to basically your local host server to see how it behaves, kind of debug, see how it kind of experimenting, is kind of trial and error that you have here. And I just wonder if there is a nice way to combine these two worlds, because teams, I guess like teams like being very very planning ahead. They would start on the design approach. I would say that if you're a developer alone hacking in your garage, you definitely will start like implementing stuff yourself. But yet, I think we need both, right? Even if you do something quick and dirty at first, at some point you will want to formalize the spec. And I think we'll actually allowing that, we're gonna very much help the adoption of API specs instead of having a lot of the APIs that are not documented at all, just left kind of in the wild, can be internal or public. But if we make this process easy, you have the requests already, right? Is it that hard to start letting you write proper specs around that and kind of educate you on how to do that at the same time? I believe there is a way to do that. And on the other side, if you start with the spec, well, at one time or another, you're gonna want to send requests to test what you have, right? So you also need this flow. So, yeah, I do think there is a point where we can meet in these two different approaches.
Working on Optic and listening to a bunch of different teams talk about this, one of the interesting sort of anti-bike shedding maneuvers we discovered, and I think everyone needs to have some good maneuvers to get through the world, was people who really want to design or code first. And it was hard to like talk to either one of those points exclusively. So we would just say, we make sure every API change is documented, reviewed, and approved by your team. And that's, I think, what people actually care about in its essence, is making sure that when things do change, that they know about it and acknowledge it. And I think there's a really compatible way with tools like Paul and what Postman is doing with open API validation, like on the requests as they come through, what Optic is doing, what other people are going to do in the space to like merge these two things together. Because I think most teams are, like you said, like they do both. Like people are design first the first time, and then like when they're changing that one field, they don't like go through the whole process. They just change the field. So we need something that works for both people, I think, and both sort of ways of working. And being upfront with the design doesn't always scale once you have the thing operating.
Yep, absolutely. And I think you guys at Optic have an amazing product for that specific use case. You know, you have, if I understand correctly, you just like proxy requests, right? And then you help people start building specs out of that. And I think it's a wonderful idea. But from our perspective at Rapid API, we have, I think, everything to win to actually have the right tool for that. The reason is we have the building side of the API with PAL, and we have a huge API marketplace, both public and for as a hub for enterprises. And if we don't manage to connect both, then it's going to be very fragmented, right? What our goal is to help people build APIs and share them with everyone and be that hub, right? So that's why I think there's a lot going on in that war between design and code.
Yeah, you know, and here's the thing that is it's been eating at me for quite a while, and that is, and I hadn't quite just heard it expressed as succinctly as I think, Micha, you have, and that is this idea that there are cases where you need to be really well constrained, and there are cases where you need to have the freedom to experiment, to try a few things. And Rapid API is sort of at the center of that space, right? Because it turns out Rapid API is presenting APIs for others to use, but you're also consuming all the APIs, right? So you're doing both of those. And I'm wondering if we don't really, even if we need to think differently about even the way the hub behaves, because you need a level of freedom in the hub that allows things to not be so brittle, not be so constrained, so that minor changes, to use, you know, Aidan's version of it, is like everything is documented and communicated properly. You're right at the heart of all of that. You're working in a business where the change from some party that you've never met could affect a whole bunch of other people that you've never met. You're in this middle ground of making promises to a lot of people. Change can really have a big problem for you, right?
Definitely. I think it goes back to that kind of programming concept that, you know, you should be very strict about what you send, but very tolerant. I forgot the exact words, but very tolerant about what you receive. And I think it's a little bit the same here. When you are on the API client side of things, you should be free to send whatever you want. But if you are on On the server side of things, you want to be extremely strict about the contract that you have with your API consumers, and being an API hub with so many APIs and wanting actually to help companies share more APIs internally as well, we need to make sure that the APIs we have there are clean and respect the contract that they have, right? And yet, unfortunately, developers can be a bit lazy. I think we all are. And if we don't make it easy for people to create these API specs based on whatever they have currently, and that can be just API traffic, the way you do Aidan or Adoptic, or API client content that we have at Power. It's I think we need that, and it's actually funny to see sometimes the screenshots that people share from Power. They have their entire API ready to go there, and I know I can't be that surprised because that's what I have for our own internal APIs. I have a full Power file with absolutely everything there, and it's kind of my documentation. Now, is it a clean open API spec that I could be proud to share? No. No. And did we, since it's an API we use only internally, did we actually had any incentive to spend the time to draft a clean API spec? Not really either. Things move fast. We move fast as a company. Do we have time to do that? Not really. So I think that's where there is a big challenge.
Well, and so I think you touched on the client server, producer consumer, like this divide that's existed for a while. And I would say what I always liked about Mashape, which became Rapid API, and is the old guard API management, the 3 scales, the masteries, the apogees, heavily invested in the server side of this coin. Mm-hmm. And you can see that reflected in Gartner right now. If you take the Gartner Magic Quadrant, they're like, if you've ever been through the Gartner Magic Quadrant hell, there's like 180 questions that are server focused, and then there's like 2 like, what do you do on the client side, and then 1 like, do you use Open API? And that's it. That's all they talk about. And so they've heavily invested in, this is where the value's at. This is where, it's kind of like the next iteration of the old school database power center, the gateway or the management layer. Mm-hmm. But what Rapid API has, as you mentioned, is the marketplace, which was kind of born out of that rhetoric of monetization of APIs. But the hub is a direction, calling it a hub is a move in a healthier direction. But with that nod that, hey, this isn't just about the server side. This is about the consumer. This isn't just the producer side. And I would say another place you can see this unfolding and evolving is Fran from Async API is doing these series right now called Thinking Out Loud, where they're processing the notion of client server in a event-driven world, in a web sockets, and they're trying to understand like what is a publisher or a consumer, and it's very different than a request response world. And so I think we're moving into a world where all this has to kind of come together, and you have, the best API producers in my books are people who are also API consumers, and because they understand the pain of being dependent on someone's API. And so that's what I hear you describing, is those worlds kind of, coming together, and into this kind of, I don't know what the future is going to hold, but I hope it's a healthier world than we've had in the past. So I like it. I like your vision.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for bringing up async APIs. I think it's also, these are shifts that I think we are still don't have a lot of clarity on. It's super interesting, as you said. Who is the consumer? Who is the producer? Right, in an API like that, and I think a lot of the conversation that we had today, I think we all had REST APIs in the back of our minds, right? We were thinking as REST. And I think even if you go to as close as GraphQL, it's already a little bit different. Would you think about having a GraphQL client where you have absolute freedom to send anything? Doesn't really make sense, right? Would you start sending GraphQL variables when you don't even have the variables in your query? that you could create a tool that does that. Who will use these features? Not really, right? It doesn't really make sense. So there are already so many more constraints on the way you do things, and in a way you have already the description of. So to go back to the class and instance thing, you already have a GraphQL query is already the class, and you just pass the variables of that class, and it's already instantiated. You don't have to do anything else. So in a way, it's already a lot simpler to that sense.
Yeah, I think you also have to add one more node to your model there. All the different consumers and their usage patterns, and you can have different fields in a REST API or in a WebSocket API or in a GraphQL API. And if someone's not using one of those fields, it's fine to delete it. But right now, that kind of information doesn't really make it all the way back to the provider, which I think is a really interesting thing that like GraphQL makes explicit in a way where you could actually look and say, oh, it's safe to delete this because it's nowhere in my last 100 days of traffic that anyone asked for this. But I feel like with REST, like you're almost always overfetching, even if you don't realize it. And the producer loses information there too. So yeah, I break this down and I always just think of it as relationships. Like whatever the protocol is, like it's a relationship between two things, and we want to make sure that we don't mess with the other people.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Don't want to mess with the other people. I like that.
Put on a t-shirt.
Sometimes.
That's the.
I disagree. I like messing with people sometimes.
we were talking in an API context.
Maybe.
APIs are just, there's always some people behind those APIs. So
always.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I have one more question for you. And this is more my own founder curiosity. When you started off with Paul, did you expect it to be a business, or were you really just building a tool for yourself?
Very good question. I think a bit in the middle. I was not expecting to build a company out of it. I was hoping to kind of be an indie developer and just work on it myself. So I think that's and already that was a bit beyond my expectations. I was like, if I can just make an app that works, that's gonna be my pleasure to work on it. And but definitely I wanted to make an app that I already monetize, and that was both because I felt like if I actually focus on building something great, it felt normal then that I wouldn't work for free, and that if people like it, they would actually pay for it. And I also wanted to check that it's actually viable. If people pay for it, it's a good metric that the product actually has some value for users. And that was a bit of a bet, I would say, because it has been always a paid app. Sure, there's a trial version, but it's among the API clients that are I would say the most used, like Postman, Insomnia, even Hopscotch today. It's the only one that was always paid, and I think in a way that only that proved that some people see value in it, and it's great to have paid customers, and definitely that helped me live out of it for a few years and actually scale a little bit the business, bootstrap it. However, I think in terms of number of users, it's definitely slowed down the adoption. So it's kind of the drawback. So I would say it's a bit of an unpopular route to create an app that is paid from day one.
Do you think there was anything you were able to do inside of Paul earlier than other tools could because you charged up front? Like anything that we got as Paul users that might not have happened if it was free?
I think definitely, because the what actually changed a lot of the business is the introduction of Power Cloud, Power for Teams, which is the synchronization backend that helped teams work together, and that both switched to a subscription service and also helped people work together, whereas before it was like more individually, you just buy a license for yourself. It also shifted the pricing model to the companies. If you buy an app for yourself, a lot of developers will just pay it out of pocket. If it's a thing for the team, you of course would put a company card on it. So it changed the paradigm a little bit. And definitely business-wise, that changed things a lot. But early on, that didn't exist, and it was an app that was only paid. So I think it allowed me to have revenue very early on, keep working on it myself, and start building a small team. So definitely, I think I wouldn't have been able to continue working on the app full-time if that was not paid at the beginning.
Did you achieve the outcomes you wanted with Paul? Do you feel like today, like think back in your earlier mind, did you do what you
Oh,
wanted?
no, I was very lucky. I think I got a lot more than both on every way, a lot more than I would have expected. For me, back in the days, it was more like a personal challenge. I was like, I want to learn something new. I'm gonna make this app, and we'll just see what the world brings to me. But I didn't have a lot of ambitions at the beginning, which is a little bit weird because I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And weirdly, when I started this app, I didn't really have that entrepreneur mindset. So it's a bit the irony, I guess.
Maybe that's why you were so
Yeah.
successful. Is you
Yeah, I was gonna say it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
we can get it. We can often get in our own way with that entrepreneurial spirit. I've done it many times. So
That's also true. That's
sorry,
also
I'm
Cool.
not crazy. There's a fruit fly in front of my face. I apologize. I mean, I'm really stoked to have you here. This has been a great session. I really like you coming in, sharing. I would love to get you back at some time to kind of talk about, I think the perspective, the hub, and the change in perspective. I think that really reflects uh, where the interesting shifts I see going on in the space right now. And one of the things I would like to get better, I know Aiden wants this, is that we get a little more structured sometimes, in our line of questioning and who we have, because we've been just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. But I would love to get more folks like maybe, Fran from Async and other folks who are seeing kind of, this paradigm shift. Maybe, Mark O'Neill from Gartner, that, I don't know if he's allowed to talk on things like this, but it'd be interesting. I would love to explore that a little bit more and see where we could go, but we'll see if we can pull it together.
That's great. I love the storytelling aspect of your podcast, guys. Not that I enjoy sharing my story itself, but I think it's always nice to hear stories. I'm definitely gonna be listening to it more actively from now.
Well,
Cool.
thank you. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Woohoo,
I
Friday
will.
night, but we appreciate you being here. Thank you.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. It was a great conversation, and yeah, good to be here. Good to see that these things are happening. Thanks
All right.
again.
Good to have you.
Go on.
Bye.
Bye. Awesome. Thank you for that, Aiden.
Of course, that was a lot of fun. We should
Yeah.
we should definitely have more people in that can talk about their stories building these tools.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I love that idea.
Well, and like I said, with the topics, I really kind of want to get better at mining the topics. That's kind of what I'm doing with the Breaking Changes, is spending time rewatching episodes, and I have transcripts of episodes. So maybe I'll do that for our previous ones and connect the dots a little bit more as we move forward and go, hey, let's explore that one piece, or let's evolve this. Who could we have here to talk to that? So we'll see what I can dig up.
Cool.
I know whatever path we go, we will find something interesting and useful. So I'm all for exploring it all with you guys.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't think of anybody else who better to do it with. So, anyways, I'm gonna let you go first, Mike, and enjoy your weekend.
You too, gentlemen. I'll see you next week.
All right, see you then.
See you, Mike.
Well, I'm sorry we didn't get to have lunch in person this week, but I do dare you to move to the Bay Area, and
hey, if that's one of the benefits, I could very well see myself doing it.
Great. Well, always good to see you, my friend. Appreciate you being here.
Cool. Good to see you too, Ken. Have a good rest of your weekend.
All right. We'll see you online. See you next week. All right. Another one for the books. That was fun. All right. Y'all enjoy the weekend, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.